Welcome to the Everybody Matters podcast. This show is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. Don't forget to connect with us on the web at barry-wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. We're going to do something a little different on this episode of the Everybody Matters podcast. We're going to take you inside Barry-Wehmiller's internal leadership training. Now, a lot of you right now are still navigating a very interesting and exceptional time in the workplace. You may be working remotely for the first time. You may be leading a team remotely for the first time. Barry-Wehmiller is in industrial manufacturing, and so most of our team members are normally in the plants day to day, except for our sales force. So, under this current situation we're in right now, where we're trying our best to stay at home, to keep our friends safe, it's a much different situation. So our Chief People Officer, Rhonda Spencer, and one of our professors in Barry-Wehmiller University, David Vandermolen, put together a webinar for leading teams remotely that has been given a number of times to leaders throughout our organization. And what you'll find while listening to this is that leadership is the same no matter where you are. At the core of it, there's a care and concern for people. Now, some of the ways that it takes shape, some of the expectations may be different, but ultimately, it's about that care for your people and putting that first. As Bob Chapman has said in a number of blog posts lately, we are all in this together, and the work that we do together will determine how we come out the other side. So here's a few tips from a webinar done by Rhonda Spencer and David Vandermolen. So let's go to them now.
We're facing an unprecedented situation, nothing that we've ever seen before. And what it brings for a lot of us that many of us don't experience in our day-to-day lives is a level of insecurity. Just not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what information to believe. And we know that people are afraid, and it's a very difficult environment in which to lead and make decisions. We do know that all of us will move toward our default behaviors in these times. So as we lead in times of stress, we're all going to go towards our natural behavior tendencies. For some of us, that's command and control under stress, that we want to take charge and make decisions in a very tactical manner. For others, we might become paralyzed with empathy for others and what they're feeling and really have a hard time moving and making decisions and leading because we're so paralyzed with empathy for others. We can really become overwhelmed in either one of those situations.
I think Bob said it very well, and we pulled a quote to really emphasize his words. Now more than ever, we must pull together to protect the health of each other, the health of our business, and the health of our communities we hold dear. These are difficult times, and we need to support and care for each other. It is time for all of us to pull together like a family would. And this is in some small way to pull together as a family of leaders to talk about how do I do leadership in life remotely and care for the people in my span of care. Each of us right now have either one of two broad responses to what's going on. We're either going to react or we're going to respond. At the core of leading in these challenging times, we tend to go to that like a tribal, deeper part or the reptilian component of our brain, and we react. Or we dig down into that subconscious, the parts of our person that, well, we kind of know better, listen to our deepest sense of right, per se, and then we can respond. This is essentially where Bob is coming from. This is the time for us to respond and not react.
What you heard from Bob is a consistent message of grounded optimism. So when you hear him, he always says that every single leader has a responsibility to give their team members a grounded sense of hope for the future. We're going to be asked to step up in different ways and to lead in different ways and to be flexible. And we have to understand that part of living our truly human culture in this time is for us to be focused on the performance of the business, especially while we have opportunities in front of us to perform, because we know that the biggest way that we touch the lives of those who are touched by this business is by giving them the security of their future. And so we know we're going to get through this strong. We know we're going to get through it together, and our culture was built to weather this kind of situation.
Without any more ado, let's get right into it. remote leading responses, the first of which is practice self-care. Let's talk about this, friends. We're in an evolving workload, right? At present, my workload has either, and this is true of you and everyone in your span of care, both at home, and throughout all of your span of care at Barry-Wehmiller. My workload is either increased, decreased, or for some, it has ceased. Now, if you're in a leadership role at Barry-Wehmiller, I am guessing it has not ceased. It probably shouldn't have. It's likely not decreased. If anything, it is increased. I have neighbors and friends who are saying, I'm getting kind of bored. And I'm looking at them going like, I don't know what you're talking about, because my workload, as many on our team, and I'm sure for you, well, our workload has likely increased. Ours may have increased, whereas those in our span of care, it may in some ways have decreased. That's an important thing to think about as we relate to this. And this brings us right back to, in a sense, a prioritization of care for your span of care. We'll begin with the most important piece, right? Care for you. Self-care precedes care of others. You've heard it if you're a frequent flyer. If not, I'll share it with you. There's a safety briefing at the beginning of every one of the flights, and it goes something like this: in the event of a loss of cabin pressure, and then they tell you, put the mask on yourself first. Well, that's really intentional, because our instinction, our gut reaction is, I'm going to save my partner, I'm going to save my child, I'm going to respond to the grandmother who's sitting next to me versus taking care of myself first. And yet there's such a limited amount of time to take care of self before you no longer are able to care for yourself or for the others. So you have to put the oxygen on yourself first, right? Care for you. And that's our encouragement, friends. Self-care begins with caring for you. Care for your family, household, your loved ones, and care for those in your Barry-Wehmiller span of care. And when we think about care, we're just going to offer some very practical things to think about. And Rhonda, I'll invite you, as I kind of wrap this up, maybe add a couple more thoughts to kind of round this out. In terms of personal practice, look, nourish, exercise, and rest your body. In the midst of high degree of stress, unprecedented change and challenge, taking care of self in terms of good nourishment, exercise, and rest is critical. I don't know about you, but I've got a strong temptation to raid the freezer for some ice cream. And I understand the need for comfort food, but maybe not the best way to nourish my body. Be mindful of that. Go out, meaning step outside, get some fresh air, change your view. If you're using your laptop and you're working remotely from the kitchen counter, maybe find a quiet spot. If you've been tucked away in some closet somewhere, find a way to get out and get some fresh air and some light. Find a different seat to sit in. Just create a different dynamic for your body to experience. And of course, we've talked a great deal of this about on our own team, of developing that discipline to disconnect. If you're going to care for self, it's critical to recognize you've got to close the laptop. And I'm grateful that I've been doing remote leading for a while, remote working for a while, and I have a space dedicated to that. I can close my laptop and walk away. And if you're not currently in that situation, my encouragement is leave the laptop in a place where you can't get it. Set your phone down where you can't reach it. Find a way and that discipline to disconnect. And we also want to encourage you to regularly check your psychological temperature. I don't know how many times on CNN or Fox Network I've seen somebody say something to the effect of, one of the things to do if you're concerned about COVID-19 is, well, to check your temperature. And I know that's a physical component to do, but there's an important part for us to check, how am I actually doing on the inside? And I had a moment the other day where I felt like all the emotion and all the challenge of what's going on kind of just rose to the surface. And that was a time for me to really do kind of a psychological check to go like, how am I really doing? Do I need to talk to somebody? Do I need a few moments just to kind of, deal with the emotions that are present with me in my body right now? An important part of your own self-care. Rhonda, what do you want to add on as you kind of wrap this piece up?
I would say for a lot of people who are used to working traditionally, the fear is that people will go home and they won't actually work. They'll be too distracted. And I think what we're finding with our team, and of course we're at the sort of center of everything that's going on and try to craft Barry-Wehmiller's response, but what I find is that most people that I talk to aren't leaving their seats and they're not taking care of themselves. And I'm fortunate that I don't have I'm not trying to teach first grade home from school at the same time as trying to deal with all the challenges that this is throwing at us as a leader. And I was on a call with one of our team members who was doing that, and the interruption of someone who needs something from you right now. And so I think just to step back and think about what it takes to be fully present and fully capable for all the different people that need you right now, and don't discount the need to step away from that laptop, step out of that seat that you feel like you've been trapped in, and to really take some time to ensure that you are really ready to be the best leader that you can be for everybody in your life.
And so we want to leave you with one parting thought with regard to this idea of practice self-care. Care of self precedes the care of others. And this applies to your family, your immediate intimate family, and your Barry-Wehmiller family as well. Care for self precedes care of others. Our second remote leading response is approach life and leading with flexibility. Approach life and leading with flexibility. So let's take a moment and do a quick reality check, right? We are remotely leading team members in a world that isn't remotely familiar to anyone. Now, I could just push on, or I could let that kind of soak in for a moment, right? We are remotely leading team members in a world that isn't remotely familiar to anyone. I'm shocked at the lack of traffic. I'm surprised at how many of my neighbors are home. I'm a little bit dazzled that when I go to pick up some steak or ground beef at Bob's Butcher, that I'm standing in a queue where there's X's on the floor. We live in really unprecedented times. It's unfamiliar to most of us. And that's an important way for us to kind of begin thinking about we're in a different world, and that requires different work. And if you're in a leadership role and you're on this call, please don't miss this. People deal with change differently. And everyone's in the midst of some profound amount of change. And people are pulled in different directions with different demands than they have been before. So yes, they have the project due date. And yes, they have the client call they have to support. And that's critical to the business of Barry-Wehmiller. At the same time, they have a 7-year-old who's asking them, can you print this off so I can complete my at-home art project? And what we're recognizing right now, and this is enterprise-wide, is that people are calling audibles. That's a term that Rhonda, I think, brought to us as we kind of put this together, day by day, because they're not running their routine plays. It's not like they're making things up, but at the same time, they're sorting out, okay, I think, well, I was planning on doing this play, but you know what? Given everything that's going on, I think I need to go to play 7, because 1 through 6, it's not going to work right now.
It's really where flexibility comes into play more than ever before.
It really does. And I think what it is and what it is not is important for us to recognize, right? To accept the life as we know it impacts our work as we want it. And I find comfort in that, and I find it a statement that I can work my mind and I can work my work around. Because we all need to make a temporary shift to make work and life work in our lives and in the lives of the people that we're caring for. You know, and if we think about some additional personal practices, we've talked about some of the self-care ones, but let's talk about the ones related to flexibility, right? Make meetings with margin in mind. If you tend to, in a sense, book an hour meeting and you pack it from beginning to end with the agenda, and I do this part, they do that part, we're going to talk about this, and you tend to even exceed the time frame and go over because it's packed with decisions or development or discussion or direction setting, carve out 30% of that meeting for just connection time. Not time to advance the project, not time to do the work, but time simply to chat. And anticipate schedule shifts, yours and your team members. If your frustration is, I can't figure out why people aren't getting on the call on time, well, consider the fact that half the people can't access the internet on time because it keeps, it's in flux with a lot of people. There's challenges going on here. And don't pack your own personal schedule. If you're going wall to wall from project to meeting, you don't have time to take care of the human component that's so critical in this time as we're leading remotely.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've experienced in all my 29 years at Barry-Wehmiller is that a lot of what makes things happen is based on relationships. And so if you think about your understanding of people, the connections that you have that are outside of the project parameters and decisions. And I know there's been so many times where I'm emailing or connecting with someone by phone and you seem to get sideways on things and you feel like you're completely disconnected. And when you see that person in person and have a conversation, you're reminded how much you like them, how much you're on the same page, how much you want the same things out of the organization, and all of those little things that create friction tend to sort of drop away. And so I think that that's the biggest risk that we have when we're all working under stress and disconnected and not in our natural working environment, is that we're going to miss those connections and miss the human part of working together. And so connect with video when you can. I know for a lot of people, the bandwidth isn't great, but connect with video when you can. Ask people how they're doing, get a tour of their personal space that they're working in, look at their dog. Everybody has really enjoyed seeing my dog. So just take time to connect with people, and the rest of it will happen a lot faster. There's a nice expression that we use in L3, slow down to speed up. And I think that really fits with this human connection piece too, is if you just slow down and reconnect with people, all the decision-making and the other stuff that needs to get done will happen a lot more smoothly.
And so we have one parting thought, right? Make space for human space. Make space for human space. If you're going to be flexible, you're going to use self-care, begin by making space for human space. And that leads us to this idea of the remote leading response of design a remote leading regimen. And we begin by saying this one basic idea as we provide maybe some practical information to help you with developing that and designing your work from home, lead from home regimen. It's not a one size fits all. It must be personal, customizable, and tailored to you. And that's an important thing as we kind of go in and talk about, well, a regimen for leading remotely.
I think we're going to talk mostly, as we started out with, about the human side of this, but it needs to be within a structure that works for you and for your team. And so I think just a few things that probably at this point, a couple weeks in for most of us, a lot of this you might have figured out, but just a bit of a reminder or refresher and maybe some new ideas in terms of what you need to set up in order to make all the rest of this stuff work. So the first thing, set up a structure. Work time, visiting hours, do not disturb times. Book chat time with your people. We've heard a lot of people that are just even doing coffee breaks or happy hours after work just for that social connection with people, using video for that. Obviously, choose a work location that works for you, and for some of us, that's easier than others. If the only thing we have to worry about is dogs barking as opposed to little kids running around. And work smart, not hard. I think we touched on that earlier, just making sure that you set those boundaries for yourself. Some of us find that if that laptop's just right there around the corner, it's pretty hard to get up and walk away and stay away from it. Establish team norms. So if you think about, every one of our teams is different, whether you're leading an engineering R&D team or a group of people, team members, or somebody who's more in the day-to-day service to customers, the same things aren't going to work for each of us. And so what's your standard meeting etiquette? Is everyone turning on their videos or are they not? When they turn on their video, do you expect them to be dressed in business dress or are pajamas okay? What are the meeting requirements in terms of being on, being online, doing your pre-work? How many meetings are appropriate for your team to have in any given day? And how much time do you need to give them for downtime and flex space? And really tailor the norms for your team to meet those team needs, and really think about what is it that's going to allow you to work together in the best way, and make sure that everybody understands. When we say team norms, what we mean is what do we expect of each other, and how do we make sure that all of us are getting our needs met as we work in this unique way. And then adapt an agenda that adapts to team needs. We worked hard on this a lot over the years in understanding what is it that everybody needs to get out of the meeting, and how do we make sure that the agenda helps them get their needs met. Some of our high Ds, they just want to make sure that the meeting is going to get something done and it's going to end on time. Some of our high Is need that social time and interaction and a little bit of time to stop and laugh. And so I think just make sure that the agenda helps ensure that everybody with their different styles gets their needs met within the meeting. Set a schedule, design your days and build in breaks and time to eat. And so I think just make sure that you have time to, as David talked about early, take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. begin and end your day with reflection. Think about what you intend to accomplish today and how you intend to accomplish it, and then step back at the end and reflect for yourself on what went well and what adjustments you want to make for the next day. I think that's more important now than it has ever been. And proactively plan and block time to do your work. I think all of us, you would think you'd have more thinking time working from home, but it doesn't really seem like that for a lot of us right now, as we're just constantly reacting to the new changes that are coming at us. Communicate differently. Initiate, we talked about this, exchanging an event simply to connect. Communicate to collaborate, and think about how we're going to need to communicate differently and over-communicate in this environment. And then we talked about virtual coffee breaks, team touch points, and idea exchanges to stay connected. I know for myself, with a lot of my groups of friends, we've been doing FaceTime or Zoom happy hours, and it really does feel like stepping outside of this cocoon that we're in and reconnecting with the world. So do that with your team, do that with your friends, and I would tell you it's actually more fulfilling than you would imagine.
So, one of the things that we have the advantage of at Barry-Wehmiller is that we have a very robust business technology platform. All of our leaders who have been involved in creating that over the years have brought to us a significant amount of services, applications, and technology that we can bring to bear to aid us right now. And so there's a couple things that I'll highlight that you may know about, you may already be using, or you may want to use even more. Set up your SharePoint standards. And if you haven't been using SharePoint as a way for document storage, for communication, collaboration, one fine way to do that. I encourage many of you to kind of get really smart with your smartphone. There are apps that you can buy. I have one actually on my phone that's designed to give me a 20-minute work window, a 10-minute break, a 20-minute work window, a 10-minute break, and it keeps me kind of on pace during the day so I don't lose my bearings. I just lose my train of thought, or I wander off to watch the next Netflix episode. Use Yammer and maybe create a Yammer group for your team or a multiple parts of your team. And of course, we focus a tremendous amount of our efforts using Teams and the functionality there. And so again, just a way to stay connected, use video, file sharing, all those documents and all those connection points in a way that, can really aid us in getting work done and leading remotely. And so that kind of, I think, gives us kind of a foray into some of the most important aspects of the remote leading responses. Practice self-care, approach life and leadership with flexibility, and of course, design your daily, your regimen for leading and working remotely. And we want to kind of end this component by bringing it back to one more kind of remote leading response, and that's practice truly human leadership. I love what Bob said, and I think he's spot on here. I am confident at the end of all this, we will have seen the truly human leaders who emerge, and communities around the world will be stronger than ever. I think that's a calling that he's invited us to, something to step into in terms of our own life and our leadership. Because if you remember, leadership is, it is an awesome responsibility. It's stewarding the lives entrusted to us. That's what it is at its core. It's better proven in tough times, not good times. Several of his recent blog posts and videos have really reminded us of that. And we're called more than ever right now to embody truly human leadership. And with that in mind, we have basically 5 things we want to remind you of. And for almost everyone on the call, this will not be new, but they're critical as it relates to how you and I can daily practice truly human leadership. And I want to begin by the first one, Style Flex, to lower stress and to better serve your team. Many of you who went through Listen Like a Leader or other alternative kind of approaches to the DIS behavioral tendency learned about the nature of style flexing. And what we want to focus on right now is the power that style flexing has in this time. If you think about it, all behavior is an expression of a need. And for every one of your team members and every one of your family members, all behavior makes sense in the moment, even if they or we come to our senses later, right? So people behave to meet their needs. And it's something for us to remember as we're engaging with all those in our span of care that, as we think about the behavior that's coming at us, that we're experiencing around us, even our own behavior, it's an expression of, a desire to meet a need. And so we thought it'd be important just to take a moment to remind you that if you have someone within your span of care, someone at home, a family member, a spouse, a child, and the men and women in your span of care at Barry-Wehmiller, there's an opportunity for you to style flex with an intention style flex to lower stress and to create more comfort. And that's going to be critical right now. Our second practice of truly human leadership is to express empathy to everyone, everywhere. Again, just let that sink in just for a moment, friends. Express empathy to everyone, everywhere. Empathy relies on specific parts of the brain that evolve to enable emotional connection with others and the motivation to care. So if you're a leader and you say, I don't really wear my emotions on my sleeve, I'm really not an emotional kind of guy, I'm a stoic, I'm just generally kind of not an emotional dude or dudette. Here's the thought. Empathy actually begins in the brain. It begins in the brain and it informs the heart, right? It's actually a brain function that affects our feeling and how we respond and move out toward others. And right now, people are having problems. Everyone, everywhere, with nearly everything. Whether that's, I can't log on to the internet, or how do I help my child with this art project? We're all experiencing a whole variety of problems with everything. And those problems can range, from the mild really to the maximum and solve points in between. But keep in mind, too, that people have problems that will never go public. They had problems before all this, and they have problems, likely that could have even exacerbated because of the current circumstances we're in. And sometimes those private problems surface, and those can create even more problems. And this is one thing that I think is helpful to all of us to not forget. People will surface their problems when they sense it is safe. And that's where empathy plays in, right? And people will deal with problems differently, without a doubt. And yes, people need to solve their own problems, but creating that safety and security for people to express where they're at, the problems they're experiencing, and what's going on is really, really critical at this time. And, it kind of reminds us of this idea of the effect that empathy has. Expressing empathy isn't always the best problem-solving solution. Now, yeah, I'm saying that, and for those of you who know me, and for the courses I teach, I'm saying that empathy isn't always the best problem-solving solution, yet creating connection can be a better solution than solving problems.
We don't always want to jump into other people's feelings with them, right? And so I think, especially right now where there's a lot of decisions to be made, and sometimes we can become overwhelmed with the stress and anxiety and what every single one of our team members is dealing with. And sometimes our job as leaders is to rise above that and try to create the right solution for the whole, and to be a solid force and someone who can help guide them forward. So I think we don't always want to see things as others see them and feel them as they're feeling them, but sometimes we want to create a connection to understand that and help them to move forward.
Empathy is to see it as the other sees it, to feel it as the other feels it. It's both in a sense of seeing from the perspective of the other, and it's feeling with people. And empathy is what really fuels that connection that we're trying to create in this remote leading and working environment that we're currently in. And in uncertain times, when anxiety and fear of the unknown is ever present, it is certainly the right time to express empathy to everyone. So we began by saying, style flex to increase communication to lower stress. We're inviting you to express empathy to everyone, everywhere. And we also want to, in terms of our practice of truly human leadership, invite you to look for the listen to me cues, clues, or signals. This is different. In the past, you may have heard us say something to the effect of, listen to people. And yes, we are implying that, but we're actually inviting you to do a step before you listen, a critical step that's easily missed in these times. Because if you remember, the one what-if proposition throughout the entire Listen Like a Leader course that we kept focusing on is, what if the most helpful thing a person can do is to listen? And of course, we would hold that that's actually true. If that's the case, then I don't want to do the behaviors that aren't related to listening. I don't want to be asking questions, giving reassurance. Hey, let me tell you my story. I have one just like that, or giving advice. Instead, we want to approach it, with listening. And with that in mind, let me give you 3 questions you should be processing and thinking through with their corrected answers. Here we go. When do I need to listen to people? Well, this is the answer, right? When people have a problem. The simplest answer to that very, big question is, When do I need to listen? When people are having a problem. How do I know when people are having a problem? And this is the twist. You don't know unless they tell you. Now think about that. You won't know unless they tell you. This is where that empathy fits in to create that security, right? But how do people tell me they're having a problem? Well, they can just flat out, say it, or, which is more common, people send you cues, clues, or signals. They kind of give you hints along the way that I'm experiencing a problem. This is why using your video feed. This is why really tuning in and paying attention, being fully present during your connections online are critical. So you can pick up on the little language, the little words, those nonverbal cues of someone sitting in their chair that lets you know they might be experiencing a problem. And of course, we have this as a basic reminder to what listening and reflective listening is all about. It's attending behavior, acknowledgments, door openers, silence, that reflective response on the foundation that I'm going to accept you as you are right now. I don't have to agree or argue. I see that's where you are. I'm fine with you being there. And I can respond with empathy toward that person, right? And if we had one kind of parting way to bring this to mind, it's this. In these uncertain times when anxiety and fear and the unknown is ever present, look for the listen to me cues, clues, or signals. And friends, I have seen this play out in my personal life here at home. I've seen this play out in my professional life as I'm engaging with team members. It's the looking for the cues, the clues and signals that position you to take the next step to actually listen and to be helpful. So, practicing truly human leadership, we say style flex, express empathy, look for those listen to me cues, clues, and signals. And we want to invite you to really recognize and praise people to encourage the heart. I don't know about you, but some encouragement would be really, would not be overdue right now. All of us are in need of some positive reinforcement for the behavior we have. And I'm not going to spend a great deal of time looking at these statistics, except to say, 3 out of 10 likely are receiving recognition. 40% of Americans say they put more energy into their work if they were recognized, appreciated. And we know, according to what Harvard has said, and even the Boston Consulting Group, that there's this power that recognition has. And Ron, I'll give you this if you want to talk about this in a moment, but recognition are really, really, really critical to us and our core to our culture. Please speak to that.
I think the important thing not to take out of the statistics is that if you recognize people, they'll do more in response, right? I think there's too many people who've taken the practice of recognition and celebration and turned it into a manipulation, a way to get more out of people. And people can see right through that. It has to come from a genuine place, a genuine recognition. And when you do it the right way, when you do it within the way that we're asking you to do it in our culture, you're not just doing it for the person on the receiving end. You're doing it for everybody who hears it, and you're doing it for yourself. And so there's a phrase that Bob says all the time that I think is really true, is to fill the airwaves with goodness and talk about the good things that are going on, and hold them up and celebrate them, and shine a light in the corners of the organization to find the people who are toiling away in relative obscurity, right? So that's one of my favorite Marcus Buckingham quotes, and to hold up what they're doing in the great work. And I think that's more important today in this environment than ever, but it's really a core part of our Barry-Wehmiller culture every day. And we can get so mired down in all the terrible things that are happening in the world right now, to hold up the great things that are happening within this organization and the heroes that are part of this organization. So you'll see that coming out from us, and I hope you'll do it with and for your own teams.
It goes back to the idea that battles are won in the hearts of men. It's an internal thing before it is experienced externally. And if you looked at any one of our core documents, go back to GPL, the L3, our leadership checklist, our safety and wellness documents, you'll see that there's a repetitive pattern throughout everything we write. One of the core threads throughout Barry-Wehmiller is the need to celebrate, recognize, and appreciate the people in your span of care. And let me give you one thought related to leadership and this idea of recognition and celebration. You may have a lot of questions, but there's one answer you can repetitively give that's low cost, low budget, and really easy and rapid to deploy. How can I encourage people, engage employees, improve morale, improve performance, reward employees? Working, leading remotely in these unprecedented times? Well, recognize and praise people to encourage their heart. That's the answer. Many questions, but one answer repetitively works for us. And it's this idea of recognizing and praising the people around you, which is pretty critical. And again, if you don't remember, this is a quick way to help you kind of get back to how to provide really good recognition and appreciation and praise for people, as opposed to saying just, hey, good job, which is not a bad thing. But if you really want to make your recognition, your praise meaningful, you want to, in a sense, use this starter statement, right? Tell the other how you feel about their behavior and its impact on you. If you were to burn that basic idea in your brain, this would be the one thing you could resort to over and over again to be able to provide really meaningful feedback to the people in your span of care in such a way where you say, I'm grateful for your thorough vendor research. It will save us nearly $3,000 for every unit we ship. That includes the feeling, how I feel about that person's behavior, which was the vendor research, the thorough research, and the impact it has on me or the organization, $3,000 in savings. Again, just a simple way to think about how do I provide the right kind of recognition and praise and encouragement for the people in my span of care. And doing that, well, it can be very powerful. And it leads us to this one kind of parting conclusion, right? In uncertain times, when anxiety and fear of the unknown is ever present, recognize and appreciate all the people in your span of care. We can't stress that enough. And so one of the things that should be on your calendar as I'm proactively planning and blocking things in Outlook is a time when you're devoting that to how am I going to write a text, an email, a video message to somebody to say, I want to recognize you and tell you how I feel about your behavior and the impact it's having on us. That's a powerful way for us to lead remotely very effectively. And I want to bring one more of our practice truly human leadership principles to light and talk about this as we kind of wrap up this portion of our call. I love this quote. It's got teeth. As we smell the fear of lack of control, I love that. Very vivid. We tend to try to assert control in the ways most familiar to us. I don't know about you, but I read that statement, I go, I get that. Like, I understand that at an intrinsic level, deep in my person. When we smell the fear of lack of control, we resort to those things, well, we know best, right? And this leads us really, I think, to either taking, well, the path of control or the path of choice. The control reaction is when the things outside of our control are out of control, we can choose to react to control whatever, whenever, and whoever. And by the way, that's pretty instinctual. That's pretty at hand to do, right? But if we choose differently, right, instead of control, but we move toward choice, well, when things outside of our control are out of control, we can choose to respond and give away our power and invite people into responsible freedom. There's a lot of people talk about empowerment, and it's, I think, widely misunderstood, and I'll call it the management, leadership, and motivational talks that are given planet-wide. Empowerment is a two-sided coin. It's kinetic and potential energy. The one side of the coin is the leader must discharge their personal power to others, and the leader must draw out the potential in the other people. The tendency when empowerment is talked about in the context of responsible freedom, it usually lies with the idea of, I want to draw out the potential of people. But that begins by giving away your power first. And, when we're working remotely and leading remotely, we have a tremendous opportunity not to hold things closely, but to give more away. To give away the power of I know this and you don't. To give away the power of this is my responsibility, I can give that to you. To give away power of knowledge and information and experience to others. So in effect, you're not needed for the power that you currently possess because you've given away to others and drawn out their potential. We're really encouraging you to to step into responsible freedom at this time, not to step into more control, but to step into more giving up control. And if we were to practice responsible freedom, it's true that the sky is the limit, right? Because it empowers people to be productive. It erodes complacency. It encourages professional growth in people, enables them to push their limits, and evokes lots of mutual trust, and it earns opportunity for even more. And responsible freedom is pretty powerful. And so here's the thing. Invite your people to, and this is the definition of responsible freedom, to bring their talents, experience, and gifts to the table and serve. Bring them to the table and serve. Invite them to. And invite them to behave with that bias to take action. Take a risk. Take a gamble. Make a move. It's not going to be deadly. Give it a shot. And for them to take accountability for their actions, for those achievements and the outcomes, whether good or bad. And we'd like to say that, well, you're invited to responsible freedom. And before we get too far along in this, though, it's important to recognize that you and I both have to, we have to make confirmation of the invitation into responsible freedom. So RSVP, that's the basically French phrase, which I cannot pronounce, but not for the life of me. I'm not sure if you're good with French. I'm not. But yeah, I'm with you. But the meaning is this: please respond. That's what it means, right? RSVP means please respond. To require confirmation of the invitation, please respond. And so here's a couple questions, right? Have you responded to the invitation to join the party? You as a leader. I mean, have you responded to the request, the invitation that you take on responsible freedom? And of course, if you have, then you're in the right position to invite your team members to the party too, because everybody wants an invitation to the party. And now you have a tremendous opportunity with where we stand, with all the changes occurring. If you're going to make a change, now's the time to invite more of your people to join the party and use their talents, gifts, and experiences in service to the organization and to each other. And again, in uncertain times when anxiety, fear, and the unknown is ever present, don't react or control. That's not the good game plan. Instead, invite others into responsible freedom.
Thanks for listening to the Everybody Matters podcast. We hope you're all staying safe out there. If you'd like to find out more about Bob Chapman and Ross Zodia's book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, go to everybodymattersbook.com. And if you've got some time on your hands right now, and you want to be inspired, and you want updates on the book, or you want more of this podcast, or you just want a lot of great content and insight to carry you through, don't forget to connect with us on the web at Barry-Wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Hang in there. We're all going to get through this together. Thanks for listening. And don't forget, Everybody Matters is the only business idea with truly unlimited